Hello, biology students. This is going to be maybe our last chapter for the class. We're going to be going over climate change since we're in our kind of ecology unit. And this is chapter 19. So with that being said, we're going to get into section 1, which is about just climate change, just in general, like what is climate change? Before we get to what climate change is, let's talk about weather versus climate. This is something we've talked about in a previous chapter, specifically chapter 18, when we looked at like different biomes. And weather is the day-to-day atmospheric conditions that's going on like right now. It's what you get. It's what's happening. Rain, shine, or rain, sunshine. Temperature, precipitation. It's what's going on right now. Climate is more long-term pattern of weather, so it's more averages than just what's going on right now. So climate is more, I want to say database, but it's more just like there's a lot more numbers. There's a lot more data with climate than just weather. Now, when we say climate change, this is just the steady rise in temperature of about 1 degree Celsius. That's about 3 degrees Fahrenheit over the past 100 years or past century due to increases in human activity. You can see here, this is our graph of temperature, and you can see there are small fluctuations from year to year, but overall, over the past 100 years, we've seen this dramatic rise in our temperature. Now, again, this is over longer periods of time. We're talking about climate rather than weather. Here's another graph looking at that same type of data. So we see over the past more than 100 years now, we've been seeing this steady rise of temperature. Now, every year isn't the hottest. You can see like this was pretty hot for back then, but we're looking at long-term averages over time. And yes, we see this our increase in the temperature over that time period. I like showing a couple like videos or animations of what is going on around the world. And in this video, you're going to see different cities in different countries. Specifically, you're going to see like the temperature based on their average. So bluer mean like a lower temperature. Red is a higher temperature. So like 0 is just the average. So if there's no color, it's just like, hey, that's the average for that year. I'm going to play this video. And what you're going to see is throughout time here, yeah, it starts out like maybe some colder and some warmer years. And as we go through here, the color, the visual really helps us kind of visualize what this looks like. As time gets closer and closer to our date, you can see there are more and more darker red colors. That's because, again, we're seeing this increase in temperature and climate over the past 100 years. You can really start to see it in the 2000s. And by the end here, you can see again a much warmer climate all over the world. Now, the cause of this climate change is primarily due to human activity, specifically us putting more and more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So you can see this is a graph showing atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations over the past about 100 years. What we're looking at are the rise and fall each year of this CO2 concentration. And what you can see is throughout time, we are seeing a drastic increase in this CO2 in our atmosphere. It's because we're using a lot more fossil fuels. We're putting just a lot more CO2 in our atmosphere, which is causing our climate to change. Now, I like to show this video. I'm not going to show the whole video because it's more than a minute long. But basically, what you're going to see is this map. See, I'm going to try and mute this. This map shows us the CO2 being produced by humans. All the dark red colors are the CO2 or in the atmosphere being produced. I'm going to go towards the end here. Or maybe it's the middle. There we go. The middle really shows it. You can see all of that CO2 being produced and what it does to our atmosphere. Okay. Now, what effect does that have on our environment? There are increased temperatures not only on land but in the oceans. Increase in oceans called ocean acidification, which means our oceans are becoming more acidic. There are more natural disasters. There's major changes to our ecosystems. There's been more extinctions. Climate change is affecting everything on Earth, and it's something that we really need to focus on in the next 100 years, because this is going to majorly impact human populations across the world. So what is causing climate change, and what is the main driver of this increase of CO2 in our atmosphere? So in section 2, we're going to be looking at the causes here. So first, again, this is just kind of an overview of what we're going to be looking at this chapter, but an increase of population. We've obviously seen a dramatic increase in how many humans are on Earth, and that's causing us to see just like differences in how just our interactions with the environment are. Two, the amount of fossil fuels that we're using. So again, we're using a lot more fossil fuels. Obviously, it's going to have an effect on the environment. Last is the greenhouse effect. And I always like to start out by saying the greenhouse effect isn't bad, but what we're doing with the greenhouse effect is bad. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. I always like to tell my students, one bowl of ice cream is great. Even one whole like tub of ice cream can be great. But when you're made to eat like 10 tubs of ice cream, it's not good for you. You're going to get sick. So too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Let's take a look here at the increasing population of the world. So the human population has been exponentially increasing in the past over 100 years. This is because there are such things as like modern medicine, the Industrial Revolution, higher crop yields. I like to show this graph when going over this. There is a lot more people on Earth than there has ever been. I mean, it's just not even close to compare, thousands of years ago where we had less than 1 billion people to now where we have over like 8 billion people. And this is just like an exponential growth rate for humans. This is just dramatic. And this is a great thing. We have more people living, but it's also causing us to have major problems in the world. Fossil fuel usage. So since the Industrial Revolution, humans have been burning and using fossil fuels. And these fossil fuels are increasing the amount of greenhouse gases trapped in our atmosphere. So the fossil fuels that we're using are good for us because we're doing more things with them, but they're also causing us to change our environment. You can see since the like 1800s, we've been using more and more of these fossil fuels in the past 200 years. Again, here's another chart of what that looks like. The CO2 emitted worldwide. Up until the 1900s, it was relatively low, and now you can see what that looks like. And we're not the only perpetrators like the United States. There are other countries. You can see like China here is a big producer of CO2. The European Union also as well, but we are one of many that's overproducing and over emitting CO2. The last cause I'm going to go over is the greenhouse effect. And like I said before, this is a natural process that's good for us. We like this because it keeps our Earth warm. Without it, we wouldn't have life on Earth. And this is where the CO2 is one of them, but greenhouse gases trap some of the radiation from the sun and keeps our Earth warm. What we see that since the CO2 is increasing is more heat is being trapped by this atmosphere. So there's a higher amount of heat just overall. So the greenhouse effect is good, but it's just too much right now. I like to show this animation when going over this. So again, you can see here the heat from the sun is warming Earth, and what's happening is this takes a little bit to go through. So some of it's being reflected off. Even some of the ice here reflects some of that heat or some of the sun's rays. As the Earth traps this heat, it's going to utilize it. Again, we like this heat, but what happens is since there is more of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, what we see is again more of this heat being trapped. The animation takes a little bit. So again, some of that heat's trapped. However, human activity is increasing the amount of CO2 gases in our atmosphere. There we go. And more heat is going to be trapped by this greenhouse effect then. And this is, again, a good thing, but too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So greenhouse gases, like CO2, directly affect the temperature. And what we see over the past 200 years is this increase in CO2 is the main cause of why we see such higher increases in temperature. So more CO2, high temperature or higher temperatures, less CO2, lower temperatures. And we've seen this throughout history. We've seen this throughout thousands and millions of years is when CO2 levels rise, so do temperature. When CO2 levels drop, so does temperature. So again, this is not something we're just seeing now. We've seen this before. I always like showing this graph when going over this part. You can see CO2 and temperature going together. This is not just a correlation. This is a causation graph. And I always like to show this end here where the CO2 is increasing and then show the actual end part of this. This is back in 2007, and you can see how much higher it is even at that point. And this has done nothing but increase since 2007. Here's what it looks like today, 2020. So yeah, this is what's happening in our Earth's atmosphere and just on our Earth. Our Earth is going through a rapid increase in CO2 concentration, and we're seeing temperatures also increase with that. Next section in this chapter, we're going to go over the effects of climate change. And one of the effects of climate change is our glaciers are melting. These are land formations. I don't know if I call them formations. These are land masses, one will say, that are not in the oceans. They're on top of land, and they don't melt throughout the seasons. What happens is we've been seeing a dramatic decrease in their size. You can see again years ago versus now, in less than 75 years, we totally see that glacier almost melting away, and all this water then gets trapped in our oceans. I like to show you some of these just animations and videos of what that looks like. You can see these glaciers melting, and that water, when it melts, gets trapped in our ocean. Again, more graphs and data showing total ice coverage in different areas drastically decreasing over the past 100 years. I'm not going to show that video because it's going to take a while, but you can see the effects of these glaciers from year after year and what they look like after just, even less than 100 years sometimes. And those glaciers are melting. So that leads to our oceans or our sea levels rising. And this is because ice, when you put it into the water and it melts, it's going to rise the level. Again, it's not by a lot, but even just a couple millimeters every single year has having drastic effect on the coastlines. Now, it's not only just the ice melting. Whenever water heats up, it actually will also expand. But this is something that we're seeing just across the world are the sea levels rising, and it's causing huge effects on our coastal cities. We're seeing a lot of damage, a lot of flooding, a lot of just bad things happening to these coastal areas. And yeah, it's causing us to spend millions and billions of dollars in taxes and just government agencies trying to help people out because people live here. So yeah, this is a big problem for those coastal towns. Another graph of what that looks like. Again, these are millimeters on this side here. And over the past 100, 150, 200 years, yeah, it's only increasing a couple millimeters every single year. But those years add up and those millimeters will add up. And again, this is causing major problems around the world just because our coastal towns are really are feeling the effect. Another thing we see is ocean acidification. This is where our oceans are becoming more and more acidic, and this is because CO2 levels are also rising in the oceans, and this causes our CO2 to become, or sorry, not our CO2, our pH in the oceans to become more acidic. And I have down here more than 1 billion people rely on the Earth's oceans for food. And what happens with this ocean acidification is a lot of our food sources are going away and dying because this ocean acidification is killing them. You can see what this ocean acidification, also known as, this is called coral bleaching, looks like. I mean, you can see before and after certain areas have become really acidified or have a higher pH, lower pH, sorry, lower pH, what that looks like. Lastly, here, we're going to go talk about natural disasters because they have not only increased in number, but they've also increased in the size and intensity. And again, this is costing us billions and billions of dollars in taxpayer money because we have to help those agencies out and help those different people out because they didn't choose to maybe live somewhere and they didn't choose to have these hurricanes and different natural disasters come about. So this is costing not only the people that live there, but people around the world because we have to help those people out. You can see the cost and number of incidents, in the past 100 years has dramatically increased because of climate change. Lastly, in this chapter, or in this section, I'm going to go over extinction rates. And yes, since the 1800s, we have had a dramatic increase in the amount of extinctions that we've seen worldwide. This is not only because of climate change, but climate change is definitely affecting this. And you can see in this graph, there's a background extinction rate, which we like to talk about as being this normal extinction rates, or this is what we normally should see. And we're way above that. And it's partly because of climate change, but it's pretty much all due to humans just really wreaking havoc on an environment and just our world just in general. The next section is going to be about the science of climate change and how do we know that climate change is occurring and how do we know that it's human caused. So something I like to go over this section or in this chapter is peer review, and this is the process that science has to go through to become like fact checked. And basically, what happens in peer review is experts in the field will review scientific publications. So they'll review research that's being done in that field. And again, it's the experts that have spent their lives studying concept of climate change specifically, that will review those publications for like paleontologists. When somebody wants to publish something in a paleontology journal, they will have other expert paleontologists that will review that research. And these reviewers are usually anonymous. So they don't actually, like the people that are publishing, they won't actually know who's reviewing their research because, again, we want to be anonymous. We don't want to have bias in our data or bias in our analysis. And what happens is they'll try to find like errors or discrepancies maybe that shouldn't be there. And they just try to find problems. And when they don't find any problems, that's when we can say something in science has been peer reviewed. This is a self-checking mechanism. This is a way that science tries to find its errors before it gets published. Now, I'm not going to show this video, but basically that shows how the scientific publications work. And what we see is more than 97% of all climate scientists agree that humans are the main cause. You can see different journals and different, this is like looking at academic studies of the scientific consensus of human-caused global warming. The lowest that we have here is 97%. Other journals have also seen more than like 98% of scientists, specifically climate scientists, people who have spent, again, their lives studying this stuff, agree that humans are the main cause of climate change. I always like to end on this with a section. If 97 out of 100 doctors think you should get your appendix removed just to be safe, what would you do? If 3% were like, man, we don't know if it's 100% your appendix, you would probably get your appendix removed, right? You would trust the more than 97% of scientists saying like, hey, this is a problem, we need to fix it. So I try to make this analogy with the 97% of all climate scientists that agree that humans are causing global climate change. Last section is going to be about the solutions that we can, do, the things that we can do to stop climate change. And there's a lot here that, again, you have to look a little bit deeper on. It's not just like a cure-all. It's not one of these things is going to, stop climate change, but these will help us reduce our climate footprint or our ecological footprint just overall. Live more sustainably. So not using excess things, trying to reduce your carbon emissions. Invest in energy efficient appliances. That's like buying things that are going to be more efficient and don't produce as much CO2 as other devices. Educate friends and family, making sure people are aware of the crisis of climate change. Supporting programs that are energy efficient and try to use alternative energies. There's a lot of companies that are trying to show that, hey, we are being efficient. We are trying to be carbon neutral, it's called. And we're just trying to be more aware of how we interact with the whole earth. Recycling, I have issues with. I do run the recycling program here, but there are some problems with recycling. It's not 100% efficient, but it does help a little bit. And again, every little bit counts. So recycling is a big help. Moving more towards renewable resources versus non-renewable resources does help. Again, there are a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there about renewable versus non-renewable. I think the main thought there is it's not perfect. None of these processes are perfect. We're always going to be producing CO2. So renewable resources, it's not like it's 100% carbon neutral. It's not 100% like perfect. And that's what a lot of people will, make it seem like, oh, well, that still produces CO2. Well, yeah, but it produces less CO2 than the non-renewable resources. So we're trying to move more towards an efficient way of producing energy and just not using as many fossil fuels. We're not saying that we don't want any fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, the main really great thing about fossil fuels is they produce a lot of energy very quickly, and that is great. We love using that when we need it. However, when we don't need that quick energy, when we can use these non-renewable resources, we should be trying to transition to it. And it's not going to be overnight. This is going to be, a 10-year long plan of how do we transition from using non-renewables to a more renewable energy system. So this is where I'm going to end the chapter, I think, on in this section.